At my daughter-in-law's birthday party, she said in front of my grandchildren, "If I ever turn into this woman here, please put me in a home." I stayed silent. The next morning, she received an email. Inheritance revoked. Signed. The woman you became. But that was just the beginning of what would become the most liberating decision of my entire life. My name is Helen, and I'm 65 years old. For the past 8 years, I thought I was building a loving relationship with my son Robert's wife, Jessica. I thought I was being the kind of mother-in-law every woman would want. I was wrong about everything. The party was held at what Jessica calls our house, though the mortgage is in my name, and I'm the one making the payments. 60 guests filled the backyard, children running around with balloons, adults chatting, over wine and expensive catered food that naturally I had paid for. I stood by the dessert table watching my 2 grandchildren, Emma and Lucas, laugh as they played with their friends. Jessica approached me wearing that smile she reserves for public occasions. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. Her dress probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month. Everything about her screamed success and youth, which made what happened next even more calculated. "Helen, honey," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "could you help me bring out more plates from the kitchen? You know where everything is." I nodded and started walking toward the house, but she wasn't finished. Emma had just spilled juice on her party dress and was crying. I instinctively moved toward my granddaughter, but Jessica's voice stopped me cold. "Oh, Emma, sweetie, don't cry. Grandma Helen will clean that up. That's what grandmas are for, right?" She laughed, and several people chuckled along. I felt my cheeks burn, but I told myself she was just being playful. I knelt down to comfort Emma, dabbing at the stain with a napkin. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just a little spill." Jessica watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she turned to her friend Sarah, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. "I swear, sometimes I think Helen believes she's the mother here instead of the grandmother." I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. At 65, I wasn't as spry as I used to be, but I wasn't decrepit either. I had raised Robert as a single mother after his father died when he was 12. I had worked 2 jobs to put him through college. I had sacrificed my own retirement savings to help him buy this house when he married Jessica. The afternoon continued with more small humiliations. Jessica asked me to serve drinks to her friends while she socialized. She introduced me to new guests as Robert's mother who helps out around here. Each word choice felt deliberate, designed to make me feel like hired help rather than family. But the moment that shattered everything came when Jessica was opening her presents. Emma and Lucas were sitting on either side of her, excited to see what their mother had received. I sat across from them, genuinely happy to see my grandchildren so joyful. Jessica opened a spa gift certificate from her sister. "Oh, this is perfect!" she exclaimed. "I desperately need some relaxation time. Being a mother is so exhausting, especially when you have to manage everyone in the household." Her friend Linda laughed. "You're such a good mother, Jess. And you're still so young and beautiful. I hope I age as gracefully as you." That's when Jessica looked directly at me, her eyes glinting with something cold. She gestured toward me with a casual wave of her hand and said, "If I ever turn into this woman here, please put me in a home." The words hit me like a physical blow. The conversations around us didn't stop, but I felt like time had frozen. Emma and Lucas giggled, not understanding the cruelty of what their mother had just said. Other guests shifted uncomfortably, some looking at their drinks, others pretending they hadn't heard. I felt my throat close up. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my wine glass. Jessica continued opening presents as if nothing had happened, chatting and laughing with her friends. But I saw the satisfaction in her eyes when she glanced at me. She had wanted to hurt me, and she had succeeded. I excused myself quietly and went to the bathroom, closing the door behind me. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, seeing what Jessica saw: gray hair, wrinkles around my eyes, age spots on my hands. Is this really how she sees me? As something to be discarded when I become inconvenient? I splashed cold water on my face and tried to compose myself. I had survived my husband's death, raised a son alone, built a career in real estate, and maintained my independence well into my 60s. I wouldn't let a 32-year-old woman make me feel worthless in my own home. When I returned to the Ayao party, I stayed quiet. I helped clean up when asked, said goodbye to guests politely, and kissed my grandchildren goodnight. Robert hugged me before I left, completely oblivious to what had happened. "Thanks for everything today, Mom. You're the best." Jessica stood beside him, her arm linked through his, that same satisfied smile on her face. "Yes, Helen, thank you for all your help. You're so good at managing things." I drove home to my small apartment, the one I had moved to after selling my house to help Robert with his down payment. I sat in my car for a long time before going inside, replaying Jessica's words over and over. The humiliation burned in my chest, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Jessica had made me feel small, all the ways she had positioned herself as the queen of a castle I had helped build. I thought about how she spoke to the grandchildren about me when I wasn't around, how she rolled her eyes when Robert suggested including me in family decisions. At 3 a.m, I got up and made myself a cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank email screen for a long time before I started typing. "Dear Jessica, after much consideration, I have decided to revoke the inheritance provisions I had planned for you and Robert. Effective immediately. All financial arrangements will be re-evaluated. Signed, the woman you became." I hesitated for only a moment before hitting send, but as I closed the laptop and finally headed to bed, I realized that email was just the beginning. For years, I had been playing by Jessica's rules, trying to be the perfect mother-in-law, never speaking up when she crossed lines. I had convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than defending my dignity. I was done keeping the peace. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: clarity. For the first time since Robert married Jessica, I wasn't worried about her approval or trying to figure out how to make her like me. I was angry, yes, but it was a clean anger, one that cut through all the confusion and self-doubt I had been carrying. My phone started ringing at 7:30. Robert's name flashed on the screen, and I knew Jessica had seen the email. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Then again. I turned off the ringer and made myself breakfast in blessed silence. While I ate my scrambled eggs, I thought about how I had gotten to this point. When had I become the family servant? When had I stopped being Robert's mother and started being Jessica's unpaid employee? It began small, as these things always do. Right after their wedding 8 years ago, Jessica would call me with little requests. "Helen, could you pick up some groceries for us? We're so busy with work." Or, "Helen, would you mind watching Emma tonight? We have dinner plans." I was thrilled that she wanted my help. I thought it meant she saw me as family. But the requests grew bigger and more frequent. When Emma was born, Jessica expected me to be there every day, helping with feedings, changing diapers, doing laundry. "You're so much better at this than I am," she would say, and I believed her. I thought I was being useful, needed. When they bought the house, my former house that I sold to help with their down payment, Jessica redecorated everything. She erased every trace of the 30 years I had lived there, the memories of raising Robert as a widow, the Christmas mornings and birthday parties. "We need to make it our own," she explained when I asked about the family photos that had disappeared. I should have seen it then. She wasn't just redecorating a house, she was rewriting history. In Jessica's version of events, their life began when she entered it. Everything before her, including me, was just backdrop. The phone rang again. This time it was Jessica's number. I stared at it, remembering all the times she had called me at inconvenient hours, expecting me to drop everything to help her. The irony wasn't lost on me that now she was the one desperately trying to reach someone who wouldn't answer. I finished my breakfast and decided to take a walk. It was a beautiful Saturday morning, and I realized I hadn't taken a leisurely walk in months. Every weekend for the past 8 years had been consumed with helping Jessica and Robert, babysitting, cleaning, cooking elaborate meals for their dinner parties, where I was never invited to sit at the table as a guest. As I walked through my neighborhood, I saw other women my age working in their gardens, reading on their porches, living their own lives. When had I stopped living mine? I remembered last month when Jessica called me on a Friday evening. "Helen, we need you to watch the kids tomorrow. Robert and I are going to Napa for the weekend. I'm sorry, but I have plans tomorrow," I had said. I was going to a book club meeting. The first social activity I had tried to maintain in years. Plans? Jessica's voice had turned sharp. What kind of plans? I'm meeting some friends. We get together once a month to discuss books. There was a pause. Helen, the children need their grandmother. Surely your book club can wait. And I had canceled. I had canceled because I didn't want to be difficult, because I wanted to be the good mother-in-law, because somewhere deep down I was afraid that if I said no too often, they would stop needing me altogether. But they didn't need me. They used me. There's a difference. And it took Jessica's cruelty at the party to make me see it clearly. My phone buzzed with a text message. Robert, Mom, call me. We need to talk about this email. Jessica is very upset. Jessica is upset. Not that he was upset about how his wife had humiliated his mother in public. Not that he wanted to understand why I felt hurt enough to send that email. Jessica was upset, so I needed to fix it. I thought about all the times Robert had chosen Jessica's comfort over my feelings. When Jessica complained that I was interfering with their parenting, Robert asked me to step back, even though I was the one providing free childcare 5 days a week. When Jessica said my cooking was too heavy for their dinner parties, Robert suggested I bring salads instead, even though I had been cooking for these people for years. My son had become a stranger to me, someone who nodded along with his wife's every whim. The Robert I raised would never have stood by while someone humiliated his mother, but that Robert had been slowly erased, just like the family photos Jessica had removed from the walls. I turned around and headed back home. I had work to do. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my laptop and started making lists. I am a practical woman, and practical women make plans. If I was going to reclaim my life, I needed to understand exactly what I was reclaiming it from. First, I calculated how much money I had spent on Robert and Jessica's household in the past year, the mortgage payments I made when Robert's job was unstable, the utilities I covered when Jessica was between freelance projects, the groceries I bought when I cooked for their dinner parties, the expensive gifts for Emma and Lucas that Jessica took credit for, the babysitting that saved them thousands in childcare costs. The number was staggering. I had been subsidizing their entire lifestyle while living in a cramped apartment and driving a 10-year-old car. Next, I made a list of all the ways I had bent my own life around their needs. The social events I had skipped, the trips I had postponed, the friendships I had neglected because Jessica always seemed to have an emergency that required my immediate attention. Finally, I wrote down every small humiliation I could remember. The times Jessica introduced me as the babysitter to her friends. The family photos where I was positioned at the edge or excluded entirely. The holiday meals where I cooked everything but was seated at the children's table. The birthday parties, where I was treated like hired help. As I wrote, I felt something shifting inside me. Each item on the list represented a choice I had made to prioritize their comfort over my own dignity. But they were my choices, which meant I could make different ones. My phone rang again, Jessica's number. This time I answered, "Helen, thank God. We need to talk." Her voice was strained, missing its usual condescending sweetness. "Yes," I said calmly, "we do. This email you sent. I don't understand what you're upset about. If this is about yesterday, I was just joking around. You know how I am at parties. I get a little silly." "I know exactly how you are, Jessica. Look, can we just forget about this? Robert is really stressed, and the kids are confused about why you're being so dramatic." Dramatic. There was that word again, the one she used whenever I showed any emotion. That wasn't convenient for her. "I'm not being dramatic, Jessica. I'm being clear. For the first time in 8 years, I'm being perfectly clear." "What does that mean?" I looked out my window at the women in my neighborhood living their own lives, making their own choices, and I smiled. "It means things are going to change." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a moment. Jessica's voice had carried that familiar tone of someone who expected to get her way simply by asking. But for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't going to give it to her. The doorbell rang an hour later. Through the peephole, I could see Robert standing on my doorstep, his face tight with frustration. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Mom." "What the hell is going on?" He pushed past me into my small living room, his movements sharp and agitated. "Jessica is crying? The kids are asking questions? And you're sending cryptic emails about inheritance?" I closed the door slowly and turned to face my son. He looked so much like his father in that moment. The same dark hair, the same stubborn set to his jaw. But his father would never have spoken to me this way. "Sit down, Robert." "I don't want to sit down. I want to understand why you're trying to destroy my family over some misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I felt that familiar anger rising again, clean and sharp. Your wife publicly humiliated me in front of my grandchildren, and you call it a misunderstanding? Robert ran his hands through his hair. She said she was just joking around. You know how Jessica is at parties? She gets nervous and says things without thinking. How Jessica is. I repeated the words slowly. Tell me, Robert, how exactly is Jessica? He looked at me like I was asking a trick question. She's fun, she's social, she likes to entertain. Sometimes she speaks before she thinks, but her heart is in the right place. I walked to my kitchen and put the kettle on. I needed something to do with my hands. When was the last time you defended me to your wife? What do you mean? I mean, when was the last time Jessica criticized me or made a joke at my expense and you told her it wasn't okay? Robert was quiet for a long moment. Mom, you're being oversensitive. Jessica doesn't criticize you. I turned around to face him. Last month, when I brought homemade cookies to Emma's school bake sale, what did Jessica say about them? I don't remember. She said they looked homemade in front of the other mothers, with that particular tone that made it sound like an insult. She said the store-bought ones looked more professional. Do you remember what you said? Robert shifted uncomfortably. No. You said nothing. You stood there while your wife made me feel foolish for spending 3 hours baking for my granddaughter's school. The kettle whistled, and I poured hot water over a tea bag. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I felt more in control than I had in years. Mom, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Jessica wasn't trying to hurt you, wasn't she? I sat down across from him. Robert, I need you to really think about something. In the 8 years you've been married, has Jessica ever even once praised me in front of other people? Has she ever introduced me as your mother with pride in her voice? Has she ever told her friends something nice about me? Robert opened his mouth, then closed it. I could see him trying to remember, and I could see the exact moment when he realized he couldn't find a single example. She appreciates everything you do for us. She tells me all the time how helpful you are. Helpful. I sipped my tea. Like a cleaning service is helpful. Like a babysitter is helpful. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? I set down my cup. Robert, when was the last time Jessica and I had a conversation about something other than what she needed me to do? Again, that look of confusion. My son, who used to tell me everything, couldn't remember the last time his wife had treated me like a human being rather than hired help. She's busy, Mom. She's got the kids, her freelance work, managing the household. Managing the household? I couldn't help but laugh. Robert, who pays the mortgage on that house? We do. I do. We pay you back when we can. When was the last time you paid me back? Silence. Who bought Emma's school supplies this year? Who paid for Lucas's soccer registration? Who covered the repair bill when your washing machine broke down? Mom, we've been going through a rough patch financially. For 8 years? The words hung in the air between us. Robert looked down at his hands, and I could see him trying to process what I was saying. But I wasn't finished. Do you want to know what I overheard last week when I was bringing groceries to your kitchen? He didn't answer, but I continued anyway. Jessica was on the phone with her sister. She said, Robert's mother is so pathetic. She has no life of her own, so she lives through us. It's actually kind of sad. Then she laughed. Robert's head snapped up. That's not. She wouldn't say that. She did say that. And when her sister asked if you knew how Jessica felt about me, do you know what she said? Mom, stop. She said, Robert does whatever I tell him to do. He's completely whipped. If I told him his mother was bothering me, he'd choose me every time. The color drained from Robert's face. You're lying. Am I? I reached for my purse and pulled out my phone. I recorded it, Robert. I was standing right outside the kitchen door. His eyes widened. You recorded a private conversation? A conversation about me, in a house I pay for, by a woman who has systematically destroyed my relationship with my son and grandchildren. I held up the phone. Would you like to hear it? Robert stared at the device like it was a weapon. No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Because you already know it's true. We sat in silence for several minutes. I watched my son struggle with the realization that his perfect marriage might not be so perfect after all. I felt sorry for him, but I also felt something else, relief. Finally, someone else knew what I had been dealing with. What do you want from me, Mom? I want you to listen to that recording. I want you to really think about how your wife treats me and how you've allowed it to happen. And then I want you to decide if you're going to be my son or Jessica's puppet." Robert stood up abruptly. "This is insane. You're trying to destroy my marriage because you're jealous of Jessica." "Jealous?" I almost smiled. "Robert, I'm 65 years old. I'm not jealous of your wife. I'm disappointed in my son." He headed for the door, then turned back. "If you play that recording for anyone, if you try to turn my kids against their mother, I'll never speak to you again." "You barely speak to me now," I said quietly. "The only time you call is when you need something." Robert left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I sat in my empty apartment, listening to the silence, and realized something important. I wasn't sad anymore. I was free. For the first time in 8 years, I knew exactly where I stood with my family. And now I could decide what to do about it. After Robert left, I sat in my quiet apartment and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to wait for them to come around or see the error of their ways. I was going to take control of my own life, starting immediately. The first call I made was to my real estate agent, Linda Morrison. We had worked together for years when I was still in the business, and she had helped me sell my house to fund Robert's down payment. She answered on the second ring. "Helen, how lovely to hear from you. How are you doing?" "I'm doing well, Linda. I need to ask you about something, and I need complete confidentiality." "Of course. What can I help you with?" "The house I sold to help my son, the one where he and his family live now. I need to know exactly what my legal options are regarding that property." There was a pause. "Helen, are you thinking of selling?" "I'm thinking of understanding my position. Can we meet tomorrow?" We arranged to meet at Linda's office the next morning. After I hung up, I made my second call to Margaret Chen, the estate planning attorney who had helped me set up my will years ago. "Mrs. Patterson, what a surprise. How can I help you?" "Margaret, I need to review my will and all the financial arrangements I've made for my family. How soon can we meet? Is everything all right?" "Everything is exactly as it should be, but I need to make some changes." We scheduled an appointment for later in the week. Then I made my third call, the one I had been putting off for 8 years. I dialed my sister Carol's number. Carol lived in Arizona, and we had grown apart after I became so consumed with helping Robert and Jessica. She had tried to warn me years ago that I was giving too much of myself to people who didn't appreciate it, but I hadn't listened. "Helen, is that really you?" Her voice was warm but surprised. "Hi, Carol. I know it's been too long." "It's been 2 years since we really talked. I was starting to think that daughter-in-law of yours had banned you from calling family." I almost laughed. "You were closer to the truth than you knew. What's going on? You sound different." I told her everything. About the party, about the years of being treated like hired help, about Robert's inability to see what was happening. Carol listened without interrupting, which was something I had forgotten about my sister. She knew when to just listen. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Helen, I'm proud of you." "Proud of me?" "For finally getting angry. For finally standing up for yourself. I've been watching you disappear into their lives for years, and I didn't know how to help you see it. I feel like I've wasted 8 years of my life. You didn't waste them. You learned something important. You learned what you won't accept. Any more?" We talked for 2 hours. Carol invited me to come visit her in Scottsdale, and for the first time in years, I said yes, without checking if Jessica needed me to babysit that weekend. The next morning, I met with Linda at her real estate office. She had pulled all the documents related to Robert's house purchase, and what she told me was eye-opening. "Helen, technically you're listed as a co-signer on the mortgage, but you're also listed as having a beneficial interest in the property due to your substantial down payment contribution. This is actually quite unusual. What does that mean in practical terms? It means you have legal standing to force a sale of the property to recover your investment, especially if the primary borrower, your son, has defaulted on payments to you." I thought about the 8 years of mortgage payments I had made, all the times Robert had promised to pay me back when things got better. What would I need to do? "You'd need to document all the payments you've made and any agreements you had about repayment." "Do you have records?" I smiled. "Linda, I spent 30 years in real estate. I have records of everything." My next stop was the bank where I had been automatically transferring money to Robert's account every month for years. I closed that automatic transfer and opened a separate savings account. Every dollar I had been giving them would now go to my own future. That afternoon, I drove to Emma's school. It was pickup time, and I knew Jessica would be there with the other mothers. I parked where I could see the school entrance and waited. Jessica appeared right on time, perfectly dressed as always, chatting with two other mothers I recognized from various school events. I watched her laugh and gesture animatedly, playing the role of the perfect mother, but I was watching with different eyes now. Emma came running out of the school building, her backpack bouncing as she ran to her mother. Jessica gave her a quick hug, then immediately started fussing with Emma's hair and clothes, making adjustments. Even from a distance, I could see Emma's shoulders slump slightly. I thought about all the times I had picked up Emma and Lucas from school, how they would run to me with genuine excitement, how they would chatter about their day without being corrected or adjusted. When had I stopped being their primary pickup person? When had Jessica decided that was her role? As I sat there watching, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Helen, the kids are asking when you're coming over again. Can you watch them Thursday night? Robert and I have dinner plans. For 8 years, I would have immediately responded yes. I would have felt needed, wanted. Now I saw the text for what it was, a demand disguised as a request, an assumption that my time belonged to them. I turned off my phone without responding. That evening, I called Emma and Lucas directly. Jessica answered the house phone with her usual cheerful voice, but it turned cold when she realized it was me. Helen, the kids are having dinner right now. I'd like to speak with them, please. They're busy. Can you call back later? Jessica, put Emma on the phone. There was a long pause. I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate being told I can't speak to my grandchildren. Put Emma on the phone, or I'll come over there. Right now. Another pause, then I heard Jessica calling Emma with forced sweetness. Emma, sweetie, Grandma Helen wants to talk to you. Grandma! Emma's voice was bright and happy. When are you coming over? Mommy said you were busy this weekend. I miss you too, sweetheart. How was school today? Emma chattered about her art project and a book she was reading. In the background, I could hear Jessica making impatient noises, probably checking her watch and tapping her foot. Can you put Lucas on too? Mommy says he can't come to the phone. Right now because he's eating. I heard Jessica's voice in the background. Tell Grandma you have to go finish your homework. Grandma, I have to go finish my homework. Okay, sweetheart. I love you. I love you too. When can we see you? I heard Jessica take the phone before Emma could answer. Helen, they really do need to focus on their evening routine. Maybe you can see them this weekend if you're free. If I was free. As if my entire schedule hadn't revolved around their needs for 8 years. Actually, Jessica, I won't be available this weekend. I'm going to visit my sister in Arizona. What? You can't just leave town without telling us. What if we need you? You'll have to figure something else out. I hung up before she could respond. Then I called the airline and booked a flight to Phoenix for Friday morning. For the first time in 8 years, I was making plans that had nothing to do with what Jessica needed from me. I spent 5 days in Arizona with Carol, and it was like remembering who I used to be. We went hiking in the desert, visited art galleries, had long lunches where we talked about books and politics and dreams, conversations that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs or schedules. Carol's friends welcomed me warmly, and I realized how long it had been since I had spoken to people who saw me as Helen, not as Robert's mother or Jessica's unpaid help. On my last morning there, Carol and I sat on her patio watching the sunrise over the mountains. You look different, she said. Lighter somehow. I feel different. I feel like myself again. So, what's your plan when you go back? I had been thinking about that for days. I'm going to finish what I started. They've had 8 years to appreciate what I brought to their lives. Now they're going to learn what life looks like without it. Carol smiled. Good for you. Good for you. When my plane landed back home Sunday evening, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The panic in Jessica's messages was almost amusing. Helen, where are you? You can't just disappear without telling us. The kids are asking for you. Emma cried when I told her you weren't coming over this weekend. Robert is furious that you left town without saying anything. Call us immediately. Something is wrong with Lucas. He has a fever and keeps asking for Grandma. We need you to come over. The last message was from Robert. Mom, this is ridiculous. Jessica had to cancel her plans because you decided to take a vacation without warning. Call me back. I deleted every message without responding. Monday morning, I met with Margaret Chen to finalize the changes to my will. The new version was beautifully simple. Everything I owned would go to a scholarship fund for single mothers returning to college. Robert and Jessica were no longer beneficiaries of anything. Are you sure about this, Helen? These decisions can be difficult to reverse emotionally, even if they're legally changeable. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Tuesday, I met with Linda Morrison again. She had prepared all the documentation I needed to demand repayment of my investment in Robert's house. The amount with interest was substantial enough to force a sale if they couldn't pay. When do you want me to serve them with the demand? Letter? Give me until Thursday. I want to have one more conversation with my son. Wednesday evening, I drove to the house I used to call home. Jessica's car wasn't in the driveway, which was perfect. I needed to talk to Robert alone. He answered the door looking haggard. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was unkempt. Mom, finally, where the hell have you been? I told Jessica I was visiting Carol. You can't just disappear. Like that. Jessica had to rearrange her entire week. I stepped past him into the living room. Emma and Lucas were watching television, still in their pajamas even though it was nearly dinner time. The house was messier than I had ever seen it. Dishes in the sink, laundry piled on chairs, toys scattered everywhere. Where is Jessica? She's at the spa. She needed a day to decompress after the stress you caused by leaving town. I almost laughed. The stress I caused. Emma noticed me and came running over. Grandma, Mommy said you were never coming back. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Mommy was wrong, sweetheart. Lucas joined us, still looking a little pale from whatever illness he'd had over the weekend. Are you staying for dinner? Daddy doesn't cook very good. Very well, I corrected automatically, then caught myself. I wasn't here to manage their household anymore. Robert ran his hands through his hair. Mom, we need to talk about this ridiculous tantrum you're having. Jessica is willing to forgive and forget if you apologize for the way you've been acting. Jessica is willing to forgive me? She knows you're going through a difficult time. Empty nest syndrome, maybe some depression. But you can't take it out on our family. I looked around the room that used to be mine, at the grandchildren I had helped raise, at the son I had sacrificed everything to give a good life. Robert, sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want you to explain why you're trying to destroy our family. Sit down or I'm leaving and you'll never see me again. Something in my voice must have convinced him. He sat heavily on the couch, and I took the chair across from him, the same chair where I used to sit during those early days when I thought I was helping build a happy family. I'm moving away, Robert. His face went white. What? I'm selling my apartment and moving to Arizona to be near Carol. I've already started looking at retirement communities in Scottsdale. You can't just move across the country. What about the kids? What about us? What about you? In the past month, you've called me exactly 3 times. Once to ask me to babysit, once to yell at me about that email, and once to demand that I come home from my vacation to help with your domestic crisis. Mom, your family, we need you. No, Robert, you need my services. There's a difference. I pulled out the legal documents Margaret had prepared. These are for you. I'm formally demanding repayment of all the money I've invested in this house and your family over the past 8 years. Robert's hands shook as he looked at the papers. This says you want $180,000. 6 months later, I was sitting on the patio of my new home in Scottsdale, watching another spectacular Arizona sunset. The moving boxes had been unpacked weeks ago, and I had settled into a routine that belonged entirely to me. Morning walks through the desert, afternoons reading by the pool, evenings with my new friends from the retirement community. For the first time in 8 years, my calendar wasn't dictated by someone else's emergencies. Carol stopped by most evenings, and we would sit together as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. Tonight, she brought margaritas and a mischievous smile. I have news from California, she said, settling into the chair beside me. Oh? Linda Morrison called me. She thought you'd want to know how things turned out. I had specifically asked Linda not to contact me directly about Robert and Jessica's situation. I needed clean separation, but I was curious about how they had managed after I left. The house sold last month, Carol continued. They had to take a loss because they needed to sell quickly, but they paid you back in full. I nodded. I had received the wire transfer but hadn't asked for details. They moved into a rental in a less expensive area. Jessica had to get a full-time job at an insurance office. I almost smiled. Jessica, who had spent 8 years playing the role of a leisurely freelancer while I subsidized her lifestyle, was now working in an office with a daily commute and a boss who expected her to show up on time. And Robert. He's working double shifts at the hospital. Linda said he looks exhausted every time she sees him around town. I sipped my margarita and felt Nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, no regret. Just a calm acceptance that they were living with the consequences of their choices. Have they tried to contact you? Robert called a few times in the first month. I let it go to voicemail. He apologized, asked me to reconsider, promised things would be different. The usual. And I deleted the messages without responding. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Carol studied my face. Any regrets? I thought about Emma and Lucas, wondered how they were adjusting to their new school, their smaller house, their stressed parents. I missed them terribly, but I didn't regret my decision. I regret that it took me so long to value myself. I regret that I taught my son it was acceptable to let his wife treat me badly. But I don't regret leaving. Good for you. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I recognized the writing style immediately. Helen, this is Jessica. I got your number from Robert. We need to talk. The kids miss you, and I think we can work this out. Please call me. I showed the message to Carol, who snorted. 8 months later, and she still thinks she can manage you. I deleted the message without responding. Jessica was learning what life looked like without a free babysitter, housekeeper, and bank. I wondered how many other people in her life she had taken for granted until they weren't available anymore. You know what's funny? I said to Carol. I spent so many years afraid that if I stood up for myself, I'd lose my family. But the truth is, I never really had them in the first place. What do you mean? Real family doesn't disappear when you stop being useful. Real family doesn't choose sides when someone treats you badly. Real family doesn't make you feel guilty for having boundaries. Carol raised her glass. To real family, then. To real family. We clinked glasses as the last light faded from the sky. In the distance, I could hear laughter from the community center where they were hosting a game night. Tomorrow, I was joining a book club. Next week, I was starting a pottery class. Small things, simple pleasures, but they were mine. My phone rang, and I glanced at the screen. Robert's number. I watched it ring through to voicemail, then turned the phone face down on the table. Aren't you curious what he wants? Carol asked. I assume it's the same thing he always wants, for me to come back and make his life easier. But I'm done making other people's lives easier at the expense of my own. Later that evening, alone in my quiet house, I did listen to Robert's message. His voice was tired, older somehow. Mom, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I needed you to know that Jessica and I are getting divorced. She left last week. She said she couldn't handle the financial pressure, couldn't handle working full-time, couldn't handle me working so much. She took the kids to her mother's in Oregon. I felt a stab of pain for Emma and Lucas, caught in the middle of their parents' collapse. But I also felt a grim recognition that this had been inevitable. Jessica had never signed up for a marriage, with actual responsibilities and real consequences. Robert's message continued. I keep thinking about what you said, about how I chose her over you. You were right. I was so focused on keeping her happy that I forgot about everyone else who mattered. I lost you, and now I've lost my kids too. I don't know how to fix any of this. He paused, and I could hear him crying. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for all of it. I know it's too late, but I needed you to know that I finally understand what I did wrong. The message ended, and I sat in my living room staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to call him back, to tell him I forgave him, to offer to help him figure out how to get his children back. The old Helen would have booked a flight immediately, but I had learned something important in these past months. I could love my son without sacrificing myself for him. I could feel sorry for his situation without making it my responsibility to fix it. I saved the message but didn't call back. Robert was a grown man who needed to learn how to solve his own problems. Maybe losing everything would teach him what I had tried to teach him with words, that taking people for granted has consequences. 3 weeks later, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a drawing from Emma, a crayon picture of a woman with gray hair sitting in a garden with a big smile on her face. At the bottom, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, she had written, I love you, Grandma Helen. There was also a note from Robert. The kids are visiting me for a few weeks. Emma insisted on sending this. She said she dreamed about you being happy in a garden. I told them you moved somewhere beautiful. I hope that's true. I hung Emma's drawing on my refrigerator and sat down to write a letter. Not to Robert, but to Emma and Lucas. I told them about the desert sunsets, about the roadrunners that visited my patio, about the pottery class where I was learning to make bowls. I told them I loved them and would always love them, and that someday, when they were older, They could come visit me if they wanted to. I didn't mention their parents' divorce or ask about their new life. Children shouldn't have to carry messages between adults. But I wanted them to know that their grandmother was happy, that she was building a life full of beauty and joy, and that love doesn't disappear just because geography changes. As I sealed the envelope, I realized something that would have surprised the old Helen. I was truly happy. Not just content, not just at peace, but genuinely happy. I had friends who enjoyed my company without needing anything from me. I had hobbies that brought me pleasure. I had a routine that belonged entirely to me. The woman Jessica had mocked at that birthday party, the one she never wanted to become, had turned out to be exactly who I was meant to be, and there was nothing pitiful about that. I mailed the letter to Emma and Lucas, then went outside to watch another perfect sunset, grateful for the courage I had finally found to choose myself.